Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 32nd episode of 2023. Before we kick off, though, I'd like to thank Westco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. This week, I'm in Mountain Connect in Denver with other key members of the industry that are working to get every American connected with broadband by 2030. And speaking of get everyone connected, Fiber Connect 2023 in Orlando is on August 20 to 23rd. That is less than 2 weeks out, and this will be the biggest and best fiber broadband event in the world this year. So if you haven't registered, please do so ASAP, because we're definitely going to be sold out. And our next and final regional Fiber Connect workshop for the year will be in Minneapolis on October 24th. You're not going to want to miss that, so please go ahead and get registered for that. And that brings us today's Fiber for Breakfast session with Ron Westfall, the research director for Futurum Group, to discuss why security is key to enduring fiber success. But before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce Nadir Noon from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thanks, Gary, and good morning to everyone who has joined us today. Before I go over a few logistical items, I would again like to thank our platinum Fiber for Breakfast sponsor, Westco. Now, if our audience today can please just keep in mind, all participants are in listen-only mode. To ask a question, please type it into the question box located within your control panel on the right side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's session. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within about 24 to 48 hours. You can find the recording in the Events and Webinars tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. At the conclusion of today's presentation, you will be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to do so. We appreciate your input. Now I will go ahead and pass it back to Gary to introduce our panelists and get us started. Gary?
Great. Well, thanks, Nadir, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. And last week on Fiber for Breakfast, we had the pleasure of hearing from Rick Talbot, the principal analyst at ACG Research, discuss middle mile networks, more traffic than you were expecting. And perhaps it's no surprise that as we roll out 10 gig PON and 25 gig PON and 50 gig PON, these networks and beyond, it's going, our middle mile networks are going to have to handle much more traffic than we would have ever previously imagined. So if you missed that, please check out the replay of that event. And today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Ron Westfall, the research director for Futurum. Futurum? How do you say that, Ron?
Futurum, right on.
Futurum?
Yep. Thumbs up.
I always struggle with that, even when Scott first named that.
I hear you. You're not the only one. No big deal.
Why security is key to enduring fiber success. Ron is an experienced, customer-focused research expert and analyst with over 20 years of experience in digital and IT transformation markets, working with businesses to drive consistent revenue and sales growth. He is a recognized authority at tracking the evolution of and identifying key disruptive trends within the service enablement ecosystem, including a wide range of topics across software and services, infrastructure, 5G, communications, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, analytics, security, cloud computing, pretty much everything, huh, Ron? You cover everything, regulatory issues. So prior to his work at the Futurum Group, Ron worked for Global Data Technology, creating syndicated custom research across a wide range of technical fields. His work with Current Analysis focused on broadband and service provider infrastructure markets. Ron holds a Master in Public Policy from University of Nevada, Vegas, and a Bachelor in Poli-Sci and Government from William & Mary. So welcome, Ron. And for our audience, please type in your questions and comments as we go and work them in the Q&A at the end. With that, let me turn things over to Ron.
Well, thank you, Gary. I fully appreciate the intro. And yes, here we are with our slides. And the theme is why security is key to enduring fiber success. And I would also like to address why fiber is key to the enduring success of security itself. And so, yeah, let's dive right in with the next slide, please. All right, here we go. Why are we here talking about security? I think we all understand why. Security is taking the spotlight. We've seen the headlines. High-profile security breaches are generating a lot of headache and concern out there. And for example, IBM just came out with their report on the cost of a data breach. And what they found is that the average cost of a data breach is $4.45 million. And that's just during this year. And that's just the average. Clearly, that is very costly for any business out there. So this is why security is pretty much being a topmost consideration, and we'll see more of that. And that leads into the next point, which actually surprised me a bit, and that is over 60% of businesses that experience a cyber attack close their door within 6 months. And this is according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance. And if that doesn't capture your attention, nothing will. I mean, this is why security has to be essential in making sure that your organization can succeed and also be able to avoid these costly breaches. And this is also tied into the next data point that I would emphasize is that cybercrime can cost businesses up to $10.5 trillion annually on a global basis. And that's according to Cybersecurity Ventures. And so, we can quibble with whether it's, below or above $10 trillion. But the bottom line is this is costly. And this is something that's clearly cybersecurity is a key part of what is going on here. And this, I think, is feeding the next point, and that is 68% of business leaders feel that cybersecurity risks are increasing. And I'm slightly surprised that it's only 68%. I'm deducing that some business leaders that they're already at maximum security alert, and therefore they can't get any higher. But regardless, clearly it's a major headache, and this is, I think, a useful data point that Accenture has come up with. And one other thing that I want to emphasize as a final takeaway here is that it's not just about the organizations themselves, but the partners. For example, the Ponemon Institute indicated that 53% of companies experienced a third-party data breach in the past year. So it's not just about protecting your own organization, but also working with your partners and channels to make sure that you're all secure. And I'll touch on that a bit more. And with that, I'll lead to our next slide, which is the warrant for why we did this survey, why we partnered with Dell. And I think it's pretty straightforward. That is, we wanted to better understand the threats that the organizations are facing when it comes to security. And that is, we know there's a serious problem out there. Now let's break it down. Let's get some data points that can help us improve the situation. And I think that's going to be something that the fiber community as a whole can make a huge difference. That is developing better strategies, better defenses to secure, for example, hardware devices, user data, and so forth. And a bit of information in terms of the demographics of the data, and I can provide more detail if needed. Basically, it was 990 responses across IT, business, and security professionals. It was on a global basis. And it basically entailed organizations of many sizes. A significant portion were the large enterprises. The largest geo was North America. But the bottom line here is that with 1,000 responses, I think we have a pretty good pulse as to what's going on with security decision making. And that leads me to our next slide, where we kicked off the survey to basically find out what are the top concerns and that have been mounting over the last 18 months. And basically, we asked the respondents to look at the categories here on the left column and respond in two ways. Has it been an overall issue, and has it been a significant issue? And as we can see, that it's pretty much a consensus here. Like 97% of the organizations have indicated that maintaining a strong security posture has simply been a challenge. And for 70% of the organizations out there, it's been a huge challenge. And so what this is leading into is that the decision makers are making a strong security posture a topmost priority across all of their decision making. And that will feel, for example, more prioritization of adapting and changing policies and processes to improve their security posture. And that, as you can see here on the data, ranked next after what is going on with overall security. And so this is piling up, but there's a silver lining here is that supply chain disruptions aren't as much of an issue as it had been, for example, during the onset of the pandemic, as well as the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So if there's any slightly good news here, this is it. I think we're also seeing, for example, in the semiconductor realm, a lot of governments and policymakers putting emphasis on making supply chains more resilient and more geographically reliable and so forth. And so we're, seeing the seeding of that, and we'll see more progress in this area. So that is something that I think is notable. But don't get me wrong, supply chain concerns are always going to be an issue, and that's related to security. And so basically, I think the key takeaway is that this is something that impacts the fiber market and community. And that includes, for example, the distributed workforces, but overall, the security implementation of the organization. And I think this will come out with the additional data points. If we go to our next slide, please. Now here we're asking, which of the following do you consider the topmost needs in maintaining a strong security posture? And we asked them to rank different categories. And at the top is operating system level security. That makes sense. Anybody has a smartphone, a laptop, and so forth has to have a secure OS, or basically you're not going to get much done. But what I think is important is that the access management came in second amongst all of these different choices. And that applies to devices, applications, and users. And that naturally extends to, for example, ONTs and other optical devices that are essential to the implementation of any organization's network. And that leads to the next point, and that is the policy management has to extend to the business-to-business capabilities, but also the access infrastructure and the hybrid workforce. And this, I think, is the one area where organizations and the fiber community can work together, getting a better understanding, a better visibility into the overall network, and that certainly includes the fiber components. And as a result, I think this is a way for fiber suppliers to sharpen their overall value propositions by making security a top selling point, a top area to address the concerns of organizations out there. And with the next slide, I can drill down more on how this can be. And here we're asking, which of the following initiatives for IT security are you considering most important for the next 12 months? So we're looking forward with this question. And tied at the top is both improving hardware security and improving mobile security. And I believe this is no coincidence. For example, any organization out there that has to implement, say, a private network or has to implement 4G, Wi-Fi capabilities has to use fiber backhaul to make those networks resilient, robust, and secure. And if you're not using fiber backhaul, I strongly recommend that you do so, because that is definitely going to be a difference maker in how efficient and how secure these networks will be over the long term, let alone today. And I think that fuels the next point, that strengthening advanced threat intelligence and supporting cloud-based security services are, I think, notable opportunities. And what I'm seeing is that many of the major fiber suppliers are already doing this, and I think there's opportunity to make this even more integral to their overall value propositions. For example, you see companies like Nokia, Cisco, Calix, and so forth. This is just a sampling. All of them are making, I think, very important portfolio-wide initiatives to make security distributed across all of their portfolio, and thus has this reassurance, this peace of mind that they can deliver to customers when they adopt any fiber-related implementation. And back to the supply chain, this I think could be a differentiator. This is something that flies under the radar a little bit, but it's come out in the survey, and that is verifying your supply chain and device component security can help boost differentiation. So it's not just about, okay, we can meet your security. The fact that the solution we're delivering has supply chain certification, validation that this is something that has not been meddled with before giving it to you, before implementing it with you, that I think is something that can prove a difference maker. And with that, we can go to our next slide. And here we're asking about EDR, or endpoint detection response. And first of all, EDR provides an integrated hub for the collection, correlation, and analysis of endpoint data, as well as coordinating alerts and responses to immediate threats. And so as you can see here, basically over 80% of the organizations out there are already implementing EDR, and the rest of them are considering it. So this I would characterize as a no-brainer. This is, I think, one key area where security can shine, but also it applies directly to fiber suppliers and all the other fiber partners out there. And this, again, I think is something that can help with that policy framework that I talked about, adopting the rules to automate responses across the entire organization. So it's not just about, for example, the fiber interconnects in a data center and the fiber connections between the headquarters and the branch offices, but also extending it to the distributed workforce. For example, using fiber to the home to really make sure the entire organization is secure. And we understand now that securing the home office is just as important as securing the headquarters, the data centers, and so forth. And so I think this is one area that, again, there can be expanded partnership and channel relations that the fiber community can definitely advance, and thus overall improve the overall threat intelligence proposition of not just their own portfolios, but certainly other customers, and as well as the partners that we touched on, because it's important to have this done correctly across the board. And with that, let's turn to our next slide. Okay, I think this is one slide before, please. Why fiber strengthens industry-wide security. And I think there are several important reasons. This is where fiber really shines. First of all, it does not require outdoor power electronics. So it's extremely well suited for intrusion detection applications. And yes, this is talking about physical perimeter security, but as we know, this is always important. For example, certainly when it comes to national security installations, but also for any organization that has a security first mandate. So I think it's important to know that by using this capability, you're not going to have some of the issues that can come up with other technologies, and I'll touch on that right now. First of all, fiber optics also improves increased signal distance for video monitoring and video surveillance applications. And we're seeing this becoming onboarding a lot more. And the question is why? Well, first of all, security is just becoming a much more important. But when it comes to video security, what we're seeing some progress in is that organizations, for example, can get insurance discounts. And so, savings anywhere is going to be important. But with fiber-fed video surveillance and security, that gives more confidence in the viability of that implementation. It's not going to be as prone to some of the issues we already talked about. Another important factor is that fiber is immune to electromagnetic and radio frequency disruption. And we're not just talking about blast radius here, we're talking about unforeseen disruption. It could be something simple as spectrum interference, when you're using a wireless application. And that's something you can avoid by using fiber wherever you can. And so I think that is something that, again, reinforces that if it's good enough for defense and national security, it's certainly going to be, I think, a top consideration for your own organization's security needs. Also, I think this is neat. Fiber transmits data through pulses of light. And quite simply, they're much more difficult to intercept than the electrical signals used by alternative technologies such as cable HFC or the wireless signals used by satellite internet or other wireless technologies. And so again, this is something that we already saw with the data points at the beginning. You can't let any part of the security lapse, and that includes physical layer security. And having a robust, strong physical layer security is going to reinforce security across the board for any organization. It doesn't matter if you're a large enterprise or a small business looking to add video security to make sure you have that extra peace of mind. Another key consideration is that broken or damaged fiber can be detected swiftly and thus make it easier to diagnose and fix before performance is impacted severely. Now, this is something that is basically absolutely critical for example, with public safety, first responder, emergency responder networks. That's going to be true for any organization. I mean, the more downtime that your business is on, the more money you lose. And it can also become, well, quite simply, an end of business proposition if this happens, as we saw with the fact that 60% of businesses ended up shutting down because of a severe security breach. And so this also leads to, I think that another reason why fiber is so critical is that it can be run next to industrial equipment. So we're seeing, use cases that are looking at more automated manufacturing, ports, mines. There's just a whole host of areas where even if you're using a wireless implementation, you need that fiber backhaul in place to make it successful. And also, fiber's less susceptible to things like temperature fluctuations, and also it can be submerged in water. And so, it's just so resilient, so flexible, and that it can just meet so many needs for a lot of key use cases and vertical industries. And with that, let's turn to our next slide. And here we are. Yeah, here are the key takeaways. I think we established that security is very important and it's top of mind for the key decision makers out there, and that it's also going to be a difference maker in how fiber succeeds. But as I noted, also fiber is going to be very essential for how security is advanced and implemented across the ecosystem. First of all, organizations must prioritize cybersecurity investment to prevent business disruption and let alone protect business outcomes, including, well, staying in business. Also, strengthening the overall cybersecurity posture must include topmost consideration of fiber technologies. I think we established that with the previous slide. And I think that feeds into, okay, fiber has all of these built-in benefits and advantages. Since that is true, how can fiber then be combined and integrated with other important security initiatives? That includes, for example, endpoint security. That includes, for example, the policy implementation for an organization. And basically, just having better visibility, having better observability, that is basically end-to-end. And all these things are tied in together. And I think that the final takeaway here is that this is an opportunity for the fiber community to assist with the customers out there in making security an organization-wide responsibility. It's not just about, okay, I have confidence in my fiber, but how can I leverage my fiber assets to make my across-the-board security all the more durable, all the more reliable, and that includes, for example, working with partners. And so on that positive note, I'll hand the mic back to you, Gary. Thank you.
Ron, yeah, really interesting stuff. So maybe we probably should have started at the beginning is to define security threats. So, I mean, you kind of during your conversation, you've talked about protecting perimeters and, worried about malware and ransomware and protection against phishing attacks and other intrusions, and then even just data threats, data theft, as well as just network disruptions, whether it's malicious disruptions, bad actors. So when you're doing the survey, how are the respondents framing their answer? What do they think about when they're thinking about security threats?
You bet. Yeah, our survey with Dell basically focused on the cybersecurity component. And so the key takeaways here is that organizations are obviously, losing a lot of sleep here. But the important thing is where is this being caused and what can be done to improve the security. And that's why, for example, I emphasize endpoint security as a key area, because it's something that all organizations, if they haven't adopted already, are going to. So this is an opportunity for anybody that is addressing this particular issue, that it certainly includes fiber suppliers, to make a stronger proposition. But also, I think it's, again, what is the nature of the security threat? Basically, yes, you can break it down in terms of, okay, this organization had a ransomware fallout. This organization was hacked by spear phishing and so forth. But the important thing is you just can't fragment your security policy. You have to have a comprehensive approach to being able to handle the security threat, regardless of what it is. So yes, that definitely includes cybersecurity, but also it has to tie into an overall security framework. And that includes physical perimeter security, because even if you have, for example, success with, okay, we're protecting our data centers, we're protecting our data assets, you have to also guard against, a malicious player posing as a contractor, for example, and getting an inside, look at your security implementation. So this is why security has to be organization-wide priority. And yes, cybersecurity is an essential part of it. And that's why our survey addressed that particular aspect, with keeping in mind it's an overall framework that is required.
Once the pandemic hit and everybody started working from home, really we saw the enterprise network really became the residential network, right? The enterprise network extended to everybody's home, and so you can't just protect your Ethernet ports, right? You have to. Everybody in your network or many people are outside your brick and mortar, and so they're definitely more at risk. So how does EDR, is that what the kind of net takeaway, or is it? I mean, should organizations have pen tests, or how? I mean, how do they know how well their network's protected?
That's an excellent question, Gary. And yes, EDR is a key component. So that is a key takeaway. And as we know, organizations are already using it, and those who aren't are going to onboard. And so that is one key part of the puzzle. But I think it's also not just about the endpoint security, which is always going to be vital. It's also about, for example, your hybrid cloud implementation. And with the advent of the hybrid workforce becoming basically a permanent feature, is that we're seeing, for example, hybrid cloud security implementations, such as what is called secure access, secure edge capabilities, or SASE, that's the acronym, gaining more traction. Because that type of approach, that framework, is implementing what we talked about here. It's getting that end-to-end visibility. So you not only have to know what's going on with your endpoint security, that includes whatever is at the home office, but it's also making sure that it is secure in full alignment with what's going on in the data center, what's going on with the edge locations, which are increasingly becoming distributed. What's going on with any part of the network that impacts your business and that needs to be secure. So I think the distributed workforce actually is reinforcing that it's actually making organizations think more about their overall security posture and getting away from, okay, here's the security patch, for this set of technology, here is the security approach for this set of users. And yes, unfortunately, a lot of it's legacy. We've been here before, but now we're seeing better thinking about how we can bridge that, how we can use, basically that software-based SASE technology in conjunction with, hardware endpoint implementations to, get that end-to-end visibility to make security a truly comprehensive approach, because there's really no way around that, especially if you're a business or a large organization.
So, quantum networking, so we saw that the first commercial quantum network being launched in Chattanooga, and that was really driven to protect the utility, right? I mean, because there's no better encryption or secure communications than quantum networking, because you can use qubit entanglement and be able to really have, unhackable communications. So do you think that will, quantum networking is going to take off to help protect networks?
That's a great question, Garrett. And I love the quantum aspect. And it's also, I think, applicable to AI and machine learning. And here we go again. It's kind of like the dual aspect. For the good guys, yes, it will make a difference. And I think certainly with quantum specifically, the built-in capabilities can make encryption foolproof, at least as we get more learning about quantum capabilities. A lot of it's still in the lab, and we still like to see more access to quantum clusters, I guess you can call them, to really advance quantum technology. The only, however, is the bad actors can also leverage quantum technology, and I've heard the scenarios where quantum can preserve all of these legacy encryption implementations, and then backward engineer being able to hack them, and thus it comes down to quantum versus quantum and AI versus AI. But I think ultimately quantum can be used to at least give the good guys a head start. And yes, I think that there's more favoritism toward quantum being integral to making security sort of like what blockchain can be in some use cases, a much harder technology to hack, to compromise, and thus create havoc.
Well, the phishing attacks are relentless, right? I probably every hour I get some, invoice, or, my staff called me, did you really want me to buy 200 gift cards, or, it's crazy, right? And you can recognize 99.9% of them, and then you do that one click, and, it's all of a sudden you got malware, or you have some kind of ransomware attack and so forth. So hopefully we'll be able to solve this, because it's exhausting.
Amen. That's true. Just recently, I had a McAfee update trigger say, you need to update it. And literally within the minute, I had somebody calling, posing as a Microsoft engineer to help me with that, quote unquote. And so, yeah, it's just incessant. I mean, yes, certain people are going to be targeted more, and it just keeps us on our toes. And the only thing I can see is that we just have to be smarter about this. That I would say somebody like Microsoft just has to be smarter about these triggers. It's like, if it's something that has your name in it and you're not authorizing it, then it has to be auto-prevented. So it's not even appearing on the screen. I mean, these are things that I think just need to be prioritized. And I think, yeah, part of the problem is patching and ad hoc security and legacy security. And, I think we're seeing progress. For example, I invoked Cisco. At the recent Cisco Live event, they were like, okay, we got to get a handle on this. And that is why we're making security not just a specific area, but also it's across the entire portfolio. It has to be embedded in every single product that we sell and why it matters to security. And I think we'll see more of that, so that it's not just additional feature, or it's a separate part that has to be bolted on type thing. And that's just been the reality, and hopefully we'll get away from that more. But yeah, in the meantime, it's a bit of a jungle, and we just have to stay on our toes and wait for better solutions.
Well, the good news is we'll have every home and business connected with fiber, so at least we'll know that the infrastructure is highly secure. We'll just have to work on making sure that we use AI and machine learning to ferret out these phishing attacks. But Ron, really appreciate your research and your industry insights. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday for Fiber Breakfast. We're going to be speaking with Cam Ganguly, research analyst from Harris X, I guess, to discuss her latest research on rural broadband and connected devices. So look forward to that, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday.